Welcome to the Pocket. I'm your host, Scooter, and here for you guys today, we're going to be talking about 10 players that you cannot miss during this year's NFL Combine. Now, the Combine leading up to the NFL Draft has sort of mixed opinions on it, depending on who you ask. Some people will say it really doesn't matter. It's the technique, the coaching, and the hard work that all pays off. And then you have guys who put a lot of stake into the combine and say, well, talent is everything, right? You can coach these athletes how to play football, but you can't coach a football player to be more athletic. Amidst this debate about how much the combine really matters since it's on air, I want to say first that I do tend to believe it does matter to an extent, but the other side does have a point. And it got me thinking about a question that I have for you guys in particular, and I want you to answer in the comments. Why isn't the combine performed in full pads? Now, I'm not saying we should have like all 300 plus players line up against each other and do Oklahoma drills. That's not what I'm saying. Although that would be pretty cool, and we would definitely find out who the number one overall pick is through both natural selection and process of elimination. But seriously, wait. I know what you're gonna say. It's because you don't want the players to get injured, and it's a controlled scientific setting like an experiment. I even looked it up with AI, and that's exactly what it says. But I can't find a good answer to this specific question. All the same drills performed in pads. The AI response assumed that I meant, oh, let's include some contact drills and things like that. That's not what I'm saying. My point is, you never play without pads in a game, obviously, but you also don't even practice in pads. I mean, there's a portion of time way early on in the summer where you're not, and you also have walkthroughs, but that does not count. You're doing walkthroughs. You're not displaying any athleticism, so you're not even really getting a good look at this guy and what he looks like as a football player until you get to the point that you're in full pads, and you might realize weeks and months after the draft, oh, this guy can't move in pads, right? What if the pads slow down a speedy receiver like a deep threat more than say another wide receiver, and you might be convinced, oh, the speedy guy ran a 4.2 and the other guy ran a 4.45, but the reality is the 4.45 guy isn't as slowed down. And then the same thing goes for, strength and how players are able to translate that. What if the pads are too much for them and it stiffens them up? Some dudes cannot move in pads because their athleticism is already on like the brink, right? That they can just barely handle being agile at their size, right? I would even go as far as to say skill position players should be holding on to a football in between drills, during drills, at all times, and maybe, sometimes without it so that you get the non-ball carrying speed. I think that's fair. And you could even have someone like come up and sneak attack them and try to force a fumble, and everyone would be on the edge. All right, maybe that part's just a little bit too much. But during the 40, one time with the ball, one time without the ball, I think that's reasonable, and maybe you get to pick when you get to carry it. It just sounds a lot cooler to me this way, but also I think it's objectively a more accurate representation of what you're getting when you draft these players. Not in clothes, not in a tracksuit, in full pads. That's what you're drafting them and signing them to do, is play football for you in full pads. Maybe there's more ways that you could go about it, more ways you could break it down. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but that's just me and that's my take. So please tell me in the comments, should the combine drills be performed in full pads? Anyway, I'm going to explain to you guys the premise of this video and how we're going to break it down. So, this is how I see it. Certain positions translate more from the test and the drills that they do in the combine more than other positions. And I would say it's mostly skill positions and some of the defensive, and most of the defensive positions. Quarterback and offensive line are definitely harder to project and translate from the drills because there is a lot of reactivity to being a quarterback. Obviously, you have to read and process the defense. So throwing on air really doesn't do that much. And as an offensive lineman, you can't forget you're working as a unit, not just as yourself. So understanding all of those assignments, being able to execute them with someone else, definitely a lot different than doing drills against the pads. I mean, you could get a good look at the footwork and the technique, but I don't think it's as objectively representative as what some of the other drills do for the other positions. Positions like running back, wide receiver, those are positions that are obviously trying to score, and they are having blocks set up for them. Their main job is to make people miss one way or another with speed or power. So athleticism directly translates to that as long as you have reasonable coordination and football IQ, right? So that's sort of the general basis behind that. We can talk more about it in the comments if you have something to say. So some of these guys are going to be looking to possibly set records at certain drills where other guys are just more well-rounded and they have a great combination of size, speed, and strength. So here are the drills that are going to represent that for you. For speed and agility, you have stuff like the 40-yard dash. Obviously, everyone knows that one. But then you also have the 10-yard split, which is the first 10 yards of the 40-yard dash. And that's a measurement of not just your top speed, but your acceleration, right? How much distance do you cover in 10 seconds? And then you have 3-cone drill, which is a L shape made out of cones where you have to sort of run and bend around them. And that's much more for agility and hip bend. That is obviously for any skill position, but also a position like edge rusher. Bend is one of the best traits that you can have. So keep an eye out for the edge rushers doing the 3-cone. Then you got the 60 and 20-yard shuttle, similar to the 40 and the 10-yard split, except, there's starting and stopping. Turning around and stuff. So it's another way to measure acceleration. But then moving on to other things than speed and agility, you have strength, obviously. So for that, it's not just bench press. Everybody knows bench press is a good measure of strength, but in football and any sport, really, your strength isn't necessarily coming from just your ability to push weight. It's your ability to push weight quickly, right? And be explosive is just the easiest way to describe it. If you can move a car, that's like impressive. But if you're just slowly rolling it, that's one thing. But if you can run and crash into it and get it going at instantaneous speed, that is explosiveness. All right. So I hope you liked my strange analogy, but what is also contributing to strength and explosiveness is your jumps, right? So you have your vertical jump, which is going to measure uh, your obviously vertical jump, but that's for like wide receivers, right? How much can you get up in the air to elevate over a cornerback? And then inversely, corners also need a good vertical jump and safeties for that very reason, so that they can defend those wide receivers. Broad jump is for, I would say, probably most of the other positions. I wouldn't say really any other position besides wide receiver and defensive backs is leaving the grass or the turf that often, except for maybe tight ends and linebackers who are covering them. But all those other positions, they're on the ground, their feet are planted. So that first step and their explosiveness out of that position is measured by your broad jump, right? So your offensive linemen, your edge rushers, your linebackers, like I said before, running backs, right? They're really low to the ground. They got to have strong legs and explosive cuts, and that's measured by the jump. So that's the drills. And the way I'm going to break down these players for you guys is I'm going to give you obviously their name, what year they are, and their school that they went to, their height and weight, what skill set that translates for them at that particular position. That's right. There's layers to this. Stay with me here. Who their pro comp is, right? So maybe an example of what that specific archetype is. So I'm not just saying they're a big running back. What kind of big running back are they? And then are they a low ranked prospect, but they're raw, right? Which is why they have the draft type still, is because even though they maybe don't have the technique down, people are so high on them just because of their raw athleticism? Or are these just really good prospects who are just looking to improve their draft stock? We've got a mixture of those two types of guys in here. So let's get right into it with our first guy, junior quarterback out of Alabama, Jalen Milroe. He measures at 6'2", 225 pounds, and he is a mobile quarterback. So you already know the athletic traits are going to be there. And it's not just that he's big and strong, and it's not just that he's fast. He's got both. Like I mentioned before, he's 6'2", 225, and his speed on the field, you wouldn't guess that he's that heavy. But then you'd watch him run someone over, and then you'd be shocked that he even is that fast and he's able to do all this. It's crazy. And then the arm strength and fearlessness running the ball, but also when he's in the pocket, this dude is a just complete beast. Now, my pro comp for him is Justin Fields, who is 6'3", 227, pretty comparable size. I mean, Fields is a little taller, but to me, it's pretty much about the size and speed combo. Milroe is much bigger than a guy like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray, but he's also faster and not quite as bulky as a guy like Jalen Hurts. So I would say he's somewhat of a combination between Fields and Hurts, but it's not like he's that much slower than Fields, which is the crazy thing. I would actually argue he's probably a better runner in college than Justin Fields was, but Fields was certainly a better passer. And you see Fields passing now in the NFL behind the bad Chicago Bears offensive line, and then the Steelers and their offensive line got hurt. If it's not all there for him, he's still having issues. And you could blame offensive coordinators like Arthur Smith all you want. And I can't remember who it was in Chicago, but you could be facing a similar issue here with Jalen Milroe, and everyone knows this already. This is common information. So this is why it's so important for him to excel in this combine anyway. We already know he's going to, but he knows he has to in order to get drafted as high as he possibly can. So he is raw, and he's got to work on processing the defenses. But if he can just make one coach fall in love with him and say, I can teach him how to play quarterback, give me the high risk, and I'll take the high reward. Depending on how the combine goes, I think a coach would consider taking him in the second round somewhere. If his combine doesn't go so well, that's going to hurt really bad. And I think he'd probably fall to the fourth round or lower. There's decent depth in this quarterback class, but I mean, even if that happens, like I would still kind of be surprised because it just takes one team, right? Even if 80% of the coaches and GMs are out on him, you might still have 20% who still think he's a second round talent, right? So very interested to see how Jalen Milroe performs at the combine, and I can't wait to watch. Up next, we have a running back out of North Carolina. He's a junior, and his name is Omarion Hampton. 6 foot, 220 pounds. He is the workhorse size running back. He's got the size and the speed and just enough fluidity to do it all. No, he's not just a receiving back. He's not just a power back. This dude can do everything. And my pro comp for him, and I like to get very specific with the running backs, I picked DeMarco Murray. 6 foot, 227, sort of like that. And when I say workhorse, there's also sort of like levels to that too, because it mostly just means you can, run and catch. He is definitely more the one cut. He's not like a jukebox, but he's also not like purely just this power runner. And DeMarco Murray was like that. He could do everything to an above average level, and that is something that makes a running back very dangerous. And this is my favorite kind of player in the NFL just as a whole. My favorite archetype of player is workhorse running backs. I think these dudes are absolute savages. But anyway, you're probably wondering, why are you talking about Omarion Hampton? Why aren't you talking about Ashton Jeanty? He's clearly the best running back in the draft. Yes, I know. And everybody else knows that. And even if he's not like the most supreme athlete at 5'9", 215, his play strength and all that, his tape, his vision and all that is also what makes him incredible. And I think there's a good chance Omarion Hampton could actually perform better than Ashton Jeanty in a lot of these combine metrics. I mean, I could be wrong, but just looking at his measurables and some of his highlights, you can tell this guy is a really, really great athlete. He might not have the vision, like I said, of a guy like Jeanty or the magical contact balance where Jeanty just seems like the second coming of like Barry Sanders. But if Ashton Jeanty was not in this draft class, Omarion Hampton would be the number one running back. And I truly believe that. You got other guys like Scadaboo, Judkins from Ohio State, who is a very similar frame to this, but I just think Hampton is going to he's going to end up testing better. So I think he's going to secure that number 2 spot as the second ranked running back. And I would be curious to see if we saw something similar to the Bijan Gibbs situation where he's not quite as good as Gibbs, where he's going to go like, what was it, like top 10 or top 12 or something. But I would be very curious to see if he cracks the top 25 after having a very impressive combine and perhaps overshadowing Jeanty in a few drills. We're going to talk about a guy who, rather than excelling in every combine drill, is really just looking at one of them or perhaps one category. And this guy's name is Isaiah Bond, wide receiver out of Texas, and he's a junior. 5'11", 180 pounds, Deep threat. Pretty skinny, yeah, but he is a deep threat, so it's to be expected. My pro comp for him is John Ross, 5'11, 190. But you know what? You might as well just say that he is like the child of John Ross and Xavier Worthy, because Worthy is like 172 and Ross is 190. So split it down the middle, you got Isaiah Bond. So the two guys who broke the combine record basically have the same measurables as this guy. So the fact that I have him on here, right? It's not about him being some well-rounded guy. It's literally just for the 40, because we saw what happened with Xavier, where they were. I feel like he was kind of seen as a second-round guy, but then after that, after he broke the record, it was like for sure this guy's gonna go in the first round at some point. And what do you know? The Chiefs made a move to go get him. So we might even see something similar to that, but I don't think he's got quite the same hype as Worthy. They were teammates, so it would be pretty funny if he broke the record just 1 year after. But in the end of the day, I'm making you guys aware there is a potential record-setting 40 time in our midst, and it is at the hands of wide receiver Isaiah Bond. And I can't wait to see how he does in the other drills like 3-cone, the 20-yard shuttle and 60-yard shuttle, because he's also got great acceleration skills as well. I feel like even though John Ross had his moments of being very like a juke stick, I just feel like maybe he wasn't quite the fluid athlete to play wide receiver. He also could have just been in a bad situation, but hey, he's not in the NFL anymore. So if Isaiah Bond can prove that he's more than just, a 40-yard dash runner, and he can actually, perform some, agile maneuvers and run some routes, some really crisp routes, then that's going to boost his draft stock as well. So we got to get one of the big boys in here. And I tried really hard to go down the list and try to find someone other than someone as close to the top as this guy. But I just had to pick him. He really is like the prototypical guy in the offensive line category. Offensive tackle out of Texas. He's a junior, Kelvin Banks Jr. 6'4", 320. Not even that massive, but the way he plays is he's like a big mover. It's not like he's got atrocious pass protection skills, but it's just his strength is certainly in the run blocking category. So pro comp for this was pretty tough. Linemen's weights are all over the place. So I just went ahead and picked Rashawn Slater, 6'4", 314. Like I said, it's tough for linemen. And Slater's not even like the same archetype. Slater's more of like a pass pro guy. Not that he can't run block, but you get what I mean. Forget the pro comp, all right? Let's talk about Kelvin Banks Jr. He is not the first tackle ranked in this year's draft class. That would be Will Campbell out of LSU, who's regarded as the most pro-ready guy. But this is why I'm picking Kelvin Banks Jr., because it reminds me of when the Giants took Andrew Thomas over Tristan Wirfs, because we said Andrew Thomas is more ready, and he's going to step in right away, and this is what we need. Maybe that is the case for a lot of teams, but you know what? Even though Andrew Thomas has played at an all-pro level before, I'm not going to say his injuries are due to the fact that he's less athletic than Tristan Wirfs, but I feel like Tristan Wirfs hasn't gotten hurt quite as much as Andrew Thomas. All right. So even if it's not from a straight performance, I would say if you're more athletic, if you're bigger and stronger, with pliable, big and strong. Tristan Wirfs was a wrestler, so he knows how to move with that size on his body. It does not slow him down. Okay. But with these little amounts of variances, I'm willing to bet that it might have something to do. I obviously think about this all the time, okay? So my point is, if Kelvin Banks Jr. can have a exceedingly better combine than Will Campbell, it really might convince some teams that, let's go for the upside. Maybe it's a team that is looking for a backup like the Bengals were last year when they took Amarius Mims in a very similar situation where they had two tackles already, but they picked him as a raw developmental guy. So Kelvin Banks Jr. can fall into that same category. And for him, since he's a big mover, want to see what he does on the bench press, right? You got to say, I feel like I haven't seen anyone get close to Stephen Paye's record. I'm pretty sure it's 49 reps, and I know he's a defensive tackle, but they just don't make dudes like that anymore. It's crazy, but I don't even think he translated that well anyway. But So it's not just the bench press, like I said. Since he's a lineman, I also want to see the broad jump, and then he is a big, strong guy, so his weakness would be with agility and things of that nature. So you'd like to see how does he compare to the other tackles in the three-cone drill. So that's how I'm going to look at a guy like this offensive tackle here. Obviously, there's more drills. Like I said, there's a technique with the lineman specific drills, but we're just talking about the combine exercises. All right. So there you have it. Kelvin Banks Jr., very high upside prospect and not ranked maybe as he should be. Up next, we have our last purely offensive player, and that's going to be tight end out of Penn State, who is a senior. I'm pretty sure he's the only senior on this list, and that is Tyler Warren. He's 6'6", 257. Doesn't get much more ideal than that. In fact, if you're getting any taller than that, I feel like you're actually limiting your ability as a blocker because even though you have long arms, you are too long, right? And dudes can get underneath you, and that leverage is important. So his type of archetype is a do it all. This dude can block, but he's obviously much better as a receiver. And my pro comp for him was I actually found someone pretty close. CJ Uzama, 6'6", 260. And if you've seen him play before, he's quite the athlete as well. I would anticipate that Tyler Warren is going to be better than CJ Uzama. But tight ends like this, they do get drafted and end up disappointing all the time, except for last year. So Tyler Warren is the top prospect, and you might think even if he has a great combine, he might crack the top 10 like Kyle Pitts did. But actually, since the Kyle Pitts incident, I feel like teams haven't been quite as willing to take a tight end very high in the draft. Notice last year the Raiders were able to get Brock Bowers at like 13, which was a steal considering he was supposed to go in the top 10. Now, there are reasons for that. Like, it was like 5 quarterbacks went in the first like 11 picks or something. So he was the 7th player, non QB, off the board. But I would like to see, the pendulum swing back in the other direction. I think teams are going to say, hey, that Brock Bowers guy, yeah, it was pretty legit. Maybe it's not Kyle Pitts. Maybe it's the Falcons, right? Or maybe Kyle Pitts just isn't Brock Bowers. Who knows what it is? But let's take a chance on this freak of a tight end and see what he can do. I mean, having a tight end, we've seen what having an all-pro caliber one can do for your offense. It's almost like you always have an option to throw the ball to, but they can also stretch the field deep just like a wide receiver. So it really adds a very specific and hard to stop element to your offense that can really be a headache for defenses. So I'd really love to see, can this guy run sub 4.5? That would be wild if he did that at this size. And if he does do that, how much does that take away from his bench press? Can this dude like break 20 reps and like run sub 4.5? I would love to see it. It sounds kind of crazy, but that's why we have the combine, right? Because when things like that actually do happen, if it doesn't get you going, I don't know what is. All right. So we're going to move on to our next guy. And we're moving on to defense, sort of. Because this next guy plays corner and wide receiver. He is a junior and he went to Colorado. If you don't know who he is already, I don't know what planet you've been living on, but we're talking about Travis Hunter. This dude went both ways in college. Who was the last guy who did that? Charles Woodson, right? Didn't he win the Heisman? Oh, yeah. Turned out to be pretty good. And Travis Hunter's like pro comp, his archetype and pro comp, like they basically don't exist to me. I mean, you had dudes who went both ways in the NFL, Deion, Charles Woodson, but they were bigger than Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is like 20 pounds less than both of them. So I'm not going to go ahead and say, oh, he's going to be like Charles Woodson. No, he's not. He's not going to be like Deion. He's not going to be like Charles Woodson. He's going to be like Travis Hunter. He's his own thing. Okay. Now for Travis Hunter, he might not even do the bench press and stuff like that. I'd like to see every player do every drill, but I understand why some of them don't. But I just want to see Travis Hunter particularly do cornerback and wide receiver drills because I want to see how teams and the media are going to react to it because I have a feeling he's going to kill it in both of them. And a lot of people, a lot of analysts out there have been saying he should play corner first because he's going to translate to that more immediately. And you can slowly sprinkle him in at wide receiver. And I don't even think that's a bad idea to take him just with the intention of being a corner, but you can kind of sprinkle him in on special teams and on offense. But he might prove this combine that he is capable of getting more than like 3 snaps a game, 10 snaps a game at wide receiver. He should be out there like 50% of the time. And I think that's what he's going to want. I mean, if you love football and you're capable of it, you're going to want to play as much of it as you possibly can. So what does all this mean for Travis Hunter? Well, he's sort of in a debate right now with the next guy we're going to talk about in terms of potentially being the number 1 overall pick. Not everyone is sold on this year's quarterback class, and we've seen it before where the first pick is not a quarterback, it's just the best player available. So that is up for grabs between Hunter and this next guy. And that's going to depend heavily on how they both do in the combine. So let's get right into that next guy. Edge rusher out of Penn State, junior Abdul Carter. 6'3". Speed rusher. Did I mention he's from Penn State? Doesn't he also wear number 11? I'm like 99% sure he does. So I wonder, who does that sound like? Oh, yeah. That's Micah Parsons right there. And now I understand Micah Parsons is like a top 3 edge rusher in the NFL, and you don't want to just go throwing that around. All right, but it's happened before where I feel like edge rushers, especially with athleticism, it projects very well. And now you can get faked out by speed, like some dude who's like 6'3", 240, runs like a 4.39, and you go, oh my God, he's going to be the best edge rusher ever, but he's got no hand strength, or he can't use his hands to fight. He's got no bend. Abdul Carter, that is not the case. This dude is a refined edge rusher with the athletic traits. So obviously potentially worthy of the number 1 overall pick. Like I said, if quarterback doesn't go, then it's probably going to be him or Travis Hunter. So for me, what I want to see out of Abdul Carter is, I'm pretty sure Micah Parsons was 4.4 flat, like pretty close to that time. I want to see that out of Abdul Carter. I don't know what Parsons did on the bench press, but it's got to be close to that. He will get compared to Micah Parsons, and I guarantee you, if he outshines him in some of these combine drills, I'm pretty sure he's going to end up being the number 1 overall pick. Because how could you not, as a GM, even if you don't need edge rusher, find a way to fit him on your team, because you're just like, how are we going to pass up on the next Micah Parsons, right? So these two kind of go hand in hand with Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. I would say the combine is going to determine who is going to be the first player off the board between these two, if it's not a quarterback. And I'm just very excited to see one of the greatest athletes in this country. I'll say in this country. All right. If I have any non-American viewers, bless your soul, because clicking on this video is just purely an act of God. But anyway, yes, one of the most incredible athletes that you will ever see, showing just how athletic they are. To me, it's just amazing. Next, we have a safety. He's a junior out of South Carolina University. Go Gamecocks, right? And his name is Nick Emmanwori. I think I said that right. Probably butchered it, though. And I apologize, Nick, if you're watching this video. But anyway, I'm going to boast about you for a little bit. So quit your whining. He is 6'3" and 227 pounds. So that, as a safety, pretty clearly indicates that you should be a box safety. Of course, anyone's capable, if you're a good enough athlete, of figuring it out at free safety, being center fielder. But that's a lot harder for these bigger guys. And you might as well just give it to the guy who's like 5'10", 200 and let him figure it out, because you're going to be better at tackling anyway. So my pro comp for him is, and I love this guy, Kam Chancellor, 6'3", 232, very close in size. Kam is a little bigger than Emmanwori. I think I'm getting it down, but I expect him to be faster than Kam, which is going to help him in today's NFL, because Kam Chancellor was an all-pro when he was playing, but that game was just a tad different than it is nowadays. It wasn't too different, but it was close to a decade ago, and there was still a lot more of that ground and pound culture. Offenses were different, and yeah, things have just changed, and you got to be faster and more agile now to keep up with these offenses and what they're doing. So I think if he performs well enough at the combine, and this is every drill for him, for Abdul Carter, like I said, speed, power, pretty much everything for him. It's the same thing for this guy. Once you reach once if you're a running back, I'd say a linebacker or an edge rusher, then pretty much every drill is important for you. If you're a big box safety like this, you could be classified as a linebacker. So that's why he goes in that chunk where I say every drill matters for this guy, because the safety gets put in pretty much every position a defensive player could get put in. They have to shed blocks pretty often. They have to cover someone deep fairly often. They have to go man to man with someone often, right? They got to do literally everything, which means you got to have literally every athletic trait to at least an average level, or else you're going to get cooked by something. The offensive coordinator of the other team is going to find out whether you're weak or slow, and he's going to expose it. So if he can have a strong enough combine, I believe there will be plenty of coaches to believe in him, and he could potentially, well, he'll probably go in the top of the second, but he could go near the bottom of the first round. Safeties just aren't valued quite that much. But hey, if running backs are going like the way Bijan and Gibbs were going, and this is a similar class, then hey, this is a good safety class. Maybe they get halfway into the first round. Maybe they do crack the top 25. We'll see. You never know what's going to happen. So don't call me crazy. All right. And now this is our last two guys. All right. So we're going to move on to linebacker out of Georgia, who's a junior, and his name is Jalen Walker. And he's got a very interesting archetype too. Something that I feel like we haven't seen quite as much nowadays. He's 6'2", 245 pounds. Usually when you get a 6'2" linebacker nowadays, they're like 220. They're basically like the size of Omarion Hampton, like the size of a running back. And go figure, I just mentioned how the NFL changed and it's a faster game now, but these guys have a purpose. This is a blitzing, run-stopping linebacker. I'm not saying he can't be in on passing downs, but this dude is raw. You see that height and weight right there, and you might think this guy's slow. No, he's explosive, but he's so aggressive, and he's taught to fly to the ball, because this is what you do with raw players, especially on defense. You tell them, fly to the ball. Whatever decision you're going to make it 100%. So at least if you screw up, maybe you're disruptive, right? Because the worst thing you can do is kind of, I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I'm hesitating. Oh my God. Worst thing you can do as a football player, right? Especially on defense. So that's what he's coached to do. And people say, oh, he over pursues and things like that. I'm like, that's because that's what he's being encouraged to over pursue, because that is a favorable consequence to him not being there at all. So I love linebackers with this amount of potential, because first of all, they really, like, running backs are getting smaller nowadays. So when they get hit by a linebacker like this, they might have to come out for a couple plays because it's just too much. You get like someone who's like 40, 50 pounds heavier than you meeting you in a gap. Oh my God. I could not even imagine. So having a guy like this blitzing, fill in the A gap, you would just love to see it. And you'd love to see him develop to something even more than that. Like someone who could be like a good spy, a good robber, good in just general zone coverage. He doesn't have to man. I wouldn't, try to get him manned up on anyone who's not like a running back or a tight end, but he's going to have to figure it out at some point. But hey, if he can show through all of these drills how athletic he is, he's going to get coaches to believe in him. And much like I said about Nick Emanwari, he is going to find a home with someone who believes in him, and then it's up to the coaches and him to figure out his potential and unlock it. So I would say linebackers, this is kind of a weaker class, even though I'm boasting about him. So I would say this is probably like a low second round guy, considering the depth at other positions. Low second, but hey, if he has a good enough combine, maybe he could get towards the top of the second round conversation. But the reality is right now he's probably sitting as like early third or something like that. Like I said, I'm still early in this process, but I think I've got a pretty good idea. And now we will move on to our last player, number 10. He's a junior. He's a defensive tackle, and he goes to Ole Miss. Walter Nolan. He's 6'3" and 293 pounds. This is a little light for a defensive tackle, wouldn't you say? Well, luckily, I'm here to tell you, there is an archetype of defensive tackle for guys built just like this. It's called three tech. When you have your two defensive tackles with a four-man front, or even if it's a five-man front, there is someone either on the center head on with the five front, or he's slightly offset if it's the four-man front. Now, in the five-man front, both of these guys are called this position name, but in the four-man front, there's only one of them, and it's not the nose guard, right? So the nose guard is half a shade on the center, and don't forget my thumb. No, don't forget my thumb. Four people. Half a shade on the center, edge rusher, edge rusher. Who's this guy? He's the three tech. He doesn't line up between the center and the guard. He lines up sort of between the center and the tackle. And this is because he's more prioritized towards pass rushing. And your nose guard is more prioritized towards run stopping. So he's to the strength of running the ball up the middle. That's where his strength is positioned to. So these three techs are closer towards once the pocket starts to form, right, from a flat line to here, you can see that's much more distance created by the pass set of the guard and the tackle. So these three techniques can afford to be a little bit lighter because they exchange it for speed and quickness, and maybe getting a little bit shorter, so they can kind of slip through very strange and unpredictable gaps that are formed between the tackle and the guard. They might be able to swim back inside if the guard oversets, right? So these guys need to have a greater level of athleticism than nose guards. So I am talking about this guy for that reason. We saw a guy like this last year. His name was Byron Murphy, except he was so good, he actually could also play nose guard, probably, if he wanted to. But his best position is three tech, and that's where he should stay. Now, this guy, it's the same case. He should not play nose guard. This is a guy that may only be used on third downs, depending on how much he develops. But that's what you're looking for. And out of these guys, you're looking for the broad jump. You're looking for the three-cone drill to see the agility and the pass rushing. The bend applies to him too, not just edge rushers. And then your 40 time, just in general, just to see what's his top speed. And did I mention bench press already? I don't think I did. Obviously, very important. And then for defensive tackles and edge rushers and linemen, I guess I'll just throw you guys this little cookie right here. Arm length is very important because that is how much separation you can create between you and the defender. So if you have short, stubby arms, that's a problem, which is sometimes what the issue is with these three techs. I don't know how long his arms are, so I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is if he has a great combine, he's going to have an opportunity to be one of the top defensive tackles selected. Now, I believe Mason Graham out of Michigan is the first ranked one. And then there's a drop off from him. He's sort of in his own tier. And that's where I think Walter Nolan can sort of insert himself in that conversation and say, hey, why not me as number two? I'm one of the best pass rushing three techs in this draft class. And by the way, my pro comp for him is pending free agent Milton Williams, who is 6'3", 291 pounds, only 2 less pounds. So that's like a breakfast for these guys, right? So that's exactly what Milton Williams does for the Eagles. You have Jordan Davis, and then you have Jalen Carter. On third down, they pulled Jordan Davis out because he's primarily a run stopper, and then they get Milton Williams in there. And it's not just to rotate and give him a breath. It's actually because Milton Williams is better on third downs when it's typically a passing play. And even if it's not, it's probably set up as a draw, or you could consider a screen, sort of like an extension of the run game. You'd rather have a guy like that out there than Jordan Davis, where Milton Williams can actually chase down and make the tackles. Maybe sniff those things out and, get to them a little bit quicker. But you always like to, look at the running backs and the wide receivers, even the edge rushers. They get their love and stuff. And the offensive linemen, they're like the big boys, but people forget defensive tackles are people too, man. Defensive tackles are people, and there's different types of them too. Like I said, you got your nose guards and you got your three techs. And you just got your standard, well-rounded guys. These dudes are very important, and we just saw in this year's Super Bowl how important defensive tackles are, right? And getting this interior pass rush. So you might say, why would I take a guy if I'm just going to have him on third down? Well, first of all, you don't have to do that. He still can play the run. It's just ideal if you can rotate him anyway so that he can get his breath and just get someone in there who's more suited for it. But we've seen this is how the Eagles beat Mahomes. This is how teams in the past have beaten Tom Brady, like the Giants back in the day, interior pass rush, because it's not enough to just have an edge rush duo. Because if you have no pass rush up the middle, they're just going to step up and then to either side or just sit there because you're never going to get around to them. So, defensive tackles, them being tremendous athletes, and Jalen Carter was a tremendous athlete, and look at how well that's translated. It is important, I promise you. Pay attention to Walter Nolan. All right, guys, that's going to be it. If you clicked on this video, kudos to you because you must really be into this draft and this combine stuff. Because if you found my channel and you're scouring through so many opinions just to find mine, I'm just saying you really must be into this. So if you liked my video and my takes on it, please do leave a like and consider subscribing so that you don't miss more of the content that I'm going to have coming out this off season and the upcoming NFL season. This is my first year doing YouTube, but I didn't miss a single video that I intended on posting. I met all the goals that I wanted to meet in the first year, and it's gone really well so far. So I'm excited to see how this offseason continues to develop. My next couple videos, I'm a Giants fan and I do Giants content primarily, actually, is what I started doing. But then I started doing NFL as like the other 50%. My next video, I want it to be a Giants offseason video. I already have most of like my notes figured out for it and stuff. So if you're a Giants fan, stay tuned for that. But if you're just a regular old NFL fan and you just want to know what content is next after this combine video, next on the NFL content would be where I was right and where I was wrong. So as I mentioned, I did predictions preseason for the whole NFL. I picked it back up like week 11 and using my preseason week 11, week 18, and all the way through my playoff predictions, I'm going to tell you guys who I was right about and who I was very wrong about this NFL season. I think it will be a nice, humbling experience. Obviously, I'm not some like professional analyst, but I do take a reasonable amount of pride in my takes. So it should be a bit of a fun video. Please don't be petty in the comments about the things that I say. And then after that, we're going to have free agency predictions, which is before the draft. That's going to come after the Giants offseason plan because obviously I want to get the Giants one out first. And then I will do sort of like reactions to the combine, who's been signed through free agency so far. And then I want to get at least one mock draft out for the whole first round and then one Giants 7-round mock draft. So we're going to have to wait a little bit for those bits of content. But like I said, you can stay tuned for the upcoming Giants offseason plan and the where I was right and where I was wrong videos soon to be coming out. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Appreciate you guys for watching, liking, subscribing, and all that. And I can't wait to see you in the next one. And I can't wait to watch this combine. Peace out, everyone.